Chegou o primeiro prêmio RBS de Empreendedorismo e Inovação. Se você tem um projeto digital inovador, essa é a sua hora. Concorra até R$100 mil em prêmios, incluindo uma viagem para o Vale do Silício. Transforme sua caixa e mostre sua ideia. Inscreva-se já!
Connection to São Paulo, but I have not been back. I hope to get there soon. So, okay, so we've got mainly a bunch of young entrepreneurs in the audience, right?
Right.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, good. All right. So, so tell me, what do you guys get together and talk about?
Building businesses.
Oh, okay. All right. So I should tell you guys that Bob sent me some questions that he wants me to talk about to you guys, and they're all good questions. I'm sure that will shed a great deal of light upon entrepreneurship. But you know, before I dive into that, you know, you guys are all sitting there figuring out how to start up your company and how to make a big success out of it. I want to know if there's some people in the audience with burning questions that you want to make sure that I address sometime in the next 30 minutes that I've got. Any burning questions, or do you trust Bob to have asked the right questions? You trust Bob.
Apparently,
is that what I'm hearing?
Apparently they do, yeah.
Oh, good.
There's one. Right. There's one. Come.
Uh-oh, we got a question here, okay?
Hello, Bob. Can you hear me?
Yep. You can hear me?
Yep.
Bill.
Okay, good.
Do you think in São Paulo we should have the same opportunities we have in the Valley, or the things happen in the Valley and not here? What do you think?
Okay, did I understand? So Bob, I need your help. I think the question was, do we have the same opportunities here in São Paulo that we would have in the Valley, or that entrepreneurs have in the Valley? Is that the question?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Okay. So, you know, so I'll give you the short answer to that, and then I'll jump into all the other topics that Bob wanted me to talk about. The short answer to that is absolutely. You've got an advantage in São Paulo over a lot of entrepreneurs here in the Valley, primarily because the Brazilian venture market is a broader, newer market, and the competition right now is less. It may not feel that way with 149 other entrepreneurs in the room with you, but I assure you that for every startup idea that you've got, there are 10 teams already in Silicon Valley working on almost exactly the same thing. So that is one of the challenges that entrepreneurs in the Valley have. So, you know, let's talk a little bit about, you know, what's going on in the Valley, and, you know, perhaps how it compares to other parts of the world, and lessons perhaps for you guys. Okay? So, I don't know what it sounds like from down there, but there is a lot of stuff going on in the Valley, and the Valley is a very, very, it's a very, very dynamic environment. It always is a dynamic environment, in good times and in bad. And the issue right now for entrepreneurs and investors is, depending upon what sector you're operating in, it can be a really good time here in the Valley, or it can be a really bad time here in the Valley right now. Because the interest of investors these days is very strong in some areas and not so strong in other areas. So it depends on the technology you're involved in. By the way, Bob or someone, give me a sense of the cross-section of the types of technologies or companies the people in the audience are most interested in. Is it mainly social, local, mobile, gaming?
Give me a second here.
Okay.
Qual a área de interesse das empresas de vocês? Ah? Social media, gaming. Huh? Health. Social media, gaming, and health. Mobile also.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Great. So right now, as you may hear, there is an extraordinary bubble going on in the social mobile gaming space here in the Valley, driven by the extraordinary success of companies like, leading with Facebook, and then companies like Zynga, with I'd say Twitter pulling up the rear, but that's another discussion. And then now Google, jumping with both feet into the social space, adds a whole bunch of excitement to the whole thing. Now my understanding is, and it's funny, is down there you guys experienced Google in the social space in the form of Orkut, but Orkut never happened here. So we never saw Google as a social player up here. But so there is a lot of stuff going on up here in that space. We are seeing, literally hundreds of startups a week are starting up new companies in that space. It's extraordinary the amount of activity that is going on. Now, very, very few of those are going to actually get funded, and most of them hope that they don't need to get venture capital funding. Most of them hope, and they should indeed be planning on the fact that they're going to have to figure out a way to bootstrap. So the good news is there are lots and lots of ways to bootstrap these companies. From our point of view as investors, we love the idea that entrepreneurs are focused on finding other sources of capital other than just venture capital. Because that's got to be the focus of any entrepreneur. Your focus has got to be on finding a way to extract value for the value you deliver. In other words, some way to get paid for what it is you're doing. So from our point of view, that has to be your #1 focus. Along the way, if we have the opportunity to invest in you and help you accelerate your growth, we're delighted by that. But the last thing we want to see here in Silicon Valley are more entrepreneurs coming in looking for money. What we are happy to see are more entrepreneurs starting up companies, and along the way, if they happen to prove that they've got something really, really impressive, venture capitalists are happy to invest in them. But the key to starting up a company is, should not, and hopefully is not, raising venture capital. So we particularly like business models that are very capital efficient, where you have the possibility of launching a company without requiring a lot of deep-pocketed venture capitalists to invest in you. So I don't know how much background Bob gave you on me. Do you guys know who I am? How much time should I spend talking about myself and Garage?
Yes.
Is Bob in the room, or is he drinking?
I'm here. Spend some time. I'm not with the beers yet.
Yeah. Okay. I spent most of my career as an entrepreneur, mainly in the software side. I started my first software company while I was in graduate school here at Stanford, and I was very fortunate to have the resources of Stanford available to me to help start up the company, and the resources of a venture capitalist who gave us $600,000 of seed money to build our company, a company called Trademark Software, which after a couple of years we wound up selling to Dow Jones in the software space. I went on to do 3 other venture-backed companies in software and 1 in pen-based computing before we started Garage in 1998. And in 1998, I got together with Guy Kawasaki and a group of other guys around the idea of, wouldn't it be a blast for us to turn all of the experience that we have in starting up companies to the space of helping other companies start up, and getting an equity stake in these companies. And so that's how we started Garage in 1998. The big idea was we could cast the net broadly. Literally, we were seeking out entrepreneurs from all over the globe that had great new technologies and great teams with a viable business model, to try to get them started and to nurture them along to the point where they could get liftoff, where they could get off the ground. And in exchange for that, we would take small equity stakes in these companies. So that's the way we got started, and with that model, we wound up funding companies like, a company you might have heard of is Pandora Media. I know Pandora doesn't operate down there, but they recently went public up here. Very successful IPO around the idea of internet radio. And several other companies you probably haven't heard of that did very well in different corners of technology. So we then were able to raise a venture fund, and we became a seed stage and early stage venture capital fund here in Silicon Valley, focused primarily on companies here on the West Coast. So that's been our focus for the last 6, 7, 8 years. More recently, though, as it turns out, and as Bob knows, we've gotten involved with a company down there in Brazil in the mobile app space that we're working on diligently, and we're hoping to launch in the next couple of months. So that's part of my new connection, or my recent connection to Brazil. So that's my background. Bob asked me to talk a little bit about the most important things that we look for in entrepreneurs as investors when we're trying to figure out what sort of companies we want to invest in. And so, and by the way, can I ask, am I speaking too fast? Am I going okay? Is the sound working all right?
Everything okay, going right timing.
Everything's good?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure everybody can hear me. Sure. So a lot of people ask us, sort of, what are the most important things, what are the most important keys in entrepreneurial success? And usually they ask it in the form of a question like, what do you look for in an entrepreneur? And frankly, what we've realized over the years is the question is misstated, because there is never such thing in a startup team as an entrepreneur. And in fact, the reality is that every startup team we invest in is a team of individuals. It's not one entrepreneur and a couple of other people who are also along for the ride. And so being an entrepreneur is not a single thing. It is a combination of skills and attitudes that are important in building a company. And almost never do all of those skills and all of those attitudes reside in the same person. So one of the fallacies of entrepreneurship is that a lone entrepreneur can successfully launch a company. And if you look at most of the successful companies in the history of high technology, you'll notice that even if there is in fact a single person who is sort of most associated with the success of that company, when you look back, oh dear, when you look back at the history of the company, now my video just went crazy. What am I? I'm looking at a candle? Am I looking at a candle?
We are not on fire here. It's everything okay.
That's okay.
Luis.
That's all right. Is it? But what am I looking at?
We're gonna turn off the video for a second and turn it on again.
Oh, huh.
But keep speaking because we're seeing you perfect. Oh,
I see. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Interesting.
Go ahead, go ahead. We're still
All
here.
right.
Everything is
All
fine.
right. So, can you guys still see me?
Perfectly.
Oh, okay. So there we go. My point was, if you look at all the successful companies in the history of high technology, none of them were started and built by a lone entrepreneur. Bill Gates, had his Paul Allen, and Larry Ellison had a team of people behind him. And certainly Steve Jobs had his Steve Wozniak. And Sergey had Larry, and Larry had Sergey. And all of these, all of these brilliant companies, even Mark Zuckerberg, as we learned in the movie, Mark Zuckerberg couldn't do it alone, right? So it is a fallacy to think of an ideal entrepreneur as being the cornerstone of a successful company. The cornerstone of a successful company is a great entrepreneurial team. And what makes a great entrepreneurial team then is the big question you should all be asking yourselves. It's, what is the complement of skills and attitudes that we need on this team to be successful? And to illustrate what we look for, I like to tell the story of the optimist and the pessimist and the engineer. And you've heard most of the story before, right? So the story is that the optimist is the person who looks at the glass and says, hey, this glass is half full, right? And the pessimist is the person who looks at the same glass and says, oh crap, this glass is half empty. And the engineer is the person who looks at the glass and says, this glass was engineered to be twice as big as it needs to be. So, the point of the story is that every team is get a lot of people. You guys hearing that?
Well, we're losing you a little bit.
Uh-oh. It feels like the cleaning crew just came in. Are you...
go back to the
no,
point,
that was just
the point of the story.
Okay, the point of the story. The point of the story is that every team needs that complement of attitudes. You need the optimist. You need the evangelist. You need the person with the vision who's going to go out there and say, who cares about the dark clouds on the horizon? We're going to build a great company. But you also need the pessimist. And, frequently that's the finance guy, right? But you need someone who at least is paying attention behind the scenes and saying, oh my God, okay, what if this slips? What are we going to do? What if this slips? What are we going to do? What if these guys react this way? What are we going to do? You need somebody who's paying attention to that, because optimism alone will not succeed. And then, of course, you need the realist. You need someone who can go out into the marketplace and report back what the customers need and what the competition is doing in a realistic frame of reference. So you need someone who is telling the truth inside the company, and that's the realist. You need someone who's paying attention to the possibility that there are contingencies that you weren't planning on, and that's, for want of a better term, that's the pessimist. And then you need the evangelist, you need the optimist, you need the enthusiast to get out there and say, gosh darn it, we're going to blast through this no matter what's going on, right? So it's not about the skills of an entrepreneur. It's about the complement of skills you get with a team. The other side of what we look for is when we invest in companies, we're a seed stage, very early stage venture fund. So we're investing very early in the process. We never see complete teams come through the door, and sometimes you'll get an entire roommate group out of Stanford and they think they're a complete team, but they're far from being a complete team. It just happens that they've all lived together for the last 3 years, right? What we look for is not a body count and people who've been handed out titles. What we look for are people who have complementary skills, who can achieve the next important milestone for the company. So I don't care if you've got a guy who's got an MBA and who is a finance whiz and a CPA, if that's not relevant to your company right now, that person is not an important part of the team. Great to have them hanging on, waiting to come on board when the time is right, but I don't want to pay him today for his skill set that I don't need for maybe 6 months or 12 months. What I want is a team that can absolutely execute on what they've got to do over the next 6 months. And then the other thing that I want is I want a team that knows how to attract great players. So, again, it's rare that we get the Nobel laureate walking into our office with a startup. Every once in a while that happens, that's great, God bless, It's great to have a Nobel laureate on your startup team. But it's not likely that you have one, right? So what I want to know, though, is if you're developing a technology that somebody else, won the Nobel Prize for a few years ago, I want to know that you've got the type of team in terms of the quality of the people on your team and the enthusiasm and capability with which you're pursuing this, that if you go talk to that Nobel laureate, he will sign up as an advisor on your team because he thinks you guys are so great. So it's about the initial team being able to attract world-class players. We never expect that the team is going to start out with world-class players. World-class meaning, gray hair and resumes and contacts and experience. That's great, you can get that later. What you need to start with is a team that can execute. So that's what we look for when we're in this startup phase. Any questions about that?
No, keep going. I think they agree.
Okay. Yeah. So the next question that Bob asked me is, do I recommend that entrepreneurs move to the US to build their startups? And so I made a comment about that earlier. The answer is it depends. So the basis on which you should move to the US is if the best way to build a company is to start global day one. Now that's not always the best way to build a company. So it may be that the best way for you to build your company is to execute in Brazil as the first phase. Now there are a lot of technologies and a lot of business models that Brazil is a perfectly good market for launching those technologies and those business models. You've got the great advantage that you've got a reasonably sizable consumer market, commercial market, industrial market, all the sectors of high technology, you've got big enough components of there in Brazil. But, I should say first and one of the possible business models that might give you an advantage is, while there might be a number of successful startups already launched in the US targeting a similar product market strategy as you, if you are an early player in Brazil, that might give you time to build and develop and accelerate your company before you go global. So it might actually be to your advantage to stay in Brazil. On the other hand, there are businesses that might grow more rapidly in the United States than in Brazil. And again, I can't speak to a lot of the elements of the Brazilian market, but I can imagine, particularly in some areas of technology, if you've got a strong, novel technology with a compelling advantage, you might be better off coming to the United States to launch that. But you can't come to the United States unless you've got a place to land. And so part of the trick is deciding whether or not to come to the United States should be based upon being able to find some sort of partner who can help you land here in the United States. If you just show up and start searching for partnerships, that's going to be challenging. It will take months for you to build the kind of partnerships you need to get an established presence here. So I'm just encouraging you to be realistic about how long and hard it is to build a presence here, but absolutely there are some business models that are going to be better here than perhaps in Brazil. Not to mention the fact that, as I'm sure all of you know, the streets of Palo Alto are paved in gold, right? You know about that, right? So that's a joke, guys. So, yeah, again, I know my sense is that it's certainly hard to raise venture capital down there. My sense is that there's not a lot of venture capital down there. And so it may seem as though because there's so much venture capital up here, it would be easier to raise it up here. But you've got to be realistic about how long and hard that's going to be to do that. So, excuse me. So Bob also asked me to talk a little bit about what are the typical mistakes that entrepreneurs make when they're starting up their company. You know, as I was kind of joking with him earlier, well, that's a much longer conversation than we possibly have time for, right? You know, there are a variety of mistakes, and there are classes of mistakes. I would say, you know, the single biggest mistake that most startups make early on is having the wrong people on the team. And, you know, that's a really, really tough one. Because, you know, generally it's a group of 2, 3, 4 guys or guys and gals who've gotten together. They're equally passionate about, you know, getting something going. And it just turns out that not everyone is equally good and or committed and or delivering around it. And that can cause a ton of stress in an early stage company. So it's the way I recommend that entrepreneurs deal with this is, and the best thing I've seen teams do, it's not so much about taking one of the guys out to the woodshed and putting a bullet in his head. That's not, you know, that can work, but it's probably not the best idea. Instead, what you guys all got to do, you know, at the earliest stage is you got to sit around the table, you got to look at each other, and you got to say, okay, what am I good at? What am I not good at? How am I going to contribute to this team? And where is it likely that I'm going to max out on my abilities to contribute to this company? And you've got to have that discussion among you. And because some of you are going to max out and some earlier than others. Now that doesn't mean you have to get off the bus. That doesn't mean that you're inappropriate for the team or that you don't deserve equity or you shouldn't be on the team. But you've got to be prepared for making transitions within the current team in the roles and responsibilities that you take. So it's extreme, you know, it's easy to talk about, it's really, really hard to do. But, you know, the most successful companies tend to be ones who either through good fortune or, you know, good dynamics manage to work their way through this. But if you look at all of these teams, you know, Gates and Allen and Jobs and Wozniak, very different contributions early days. And those differences absolutely became apparent over time. And the roles and the responsibilities changed over time. And sometimes there was friction. And, you know, a la Zuckerberg and Larry Ellison, who was the founder of Oracle. And sometimes it worked out, you know, in terms of Larry and Sergey at Google, and the guys at Sun, and for a while, Gates and Allen. So, you know, that's the biggest issue you've got to face, is the right balance of skills on who's on the team. The flip side is the other extreme, where you've got a sort of single founder who's got this really clever idea, and it's his baby, it's his idea, it's his company, goddammit, but somehow he persuades a couple of guys to join him for the ride. And so he starts out, he's got 98% of the equity, and out of the kindness of his heart, he's given 1% of the equity to the other two guys, because he's such a swell guy, right? That is not a team, right? And so that's going to come out pretty quickly that you do not have a team. And, you know, you're just not going to be able to sustain that over any period of time. So that's sort of the other side of that extreme. So, you know, that's sort of my main message on errors that teams make. You know, there are a lot of other categories of error, and the other one I'll mention is one we see a lot of. That's the difference between the inventor-oriented team and the entrepreneur-oriented team, right? So the inventor is the person who comes up with a brilliant technology. You know, it's their aha moment insight. Nobody in the world has ever come up with anything as brilliant as this, right? And as soon as I show the rest of the world the brilliance of my innovation, they will beat a path to my door and I will become rich. Right? That's the inventor, right? The entrepreneur is the person who comes up with an idea because they see that there's a market opportunity. Wow! You know, nobody has a good contact manager for us to use on a day-to-day basis, right? I mean, I don't know what you guys use as a contact manager, but right now, there is no good contact manager out there on the market, believe it or not. It just doesn't exist. Salesforce is not a good contact manager for an individual trying to manage his or her contacts, right? Certainly Facebook is not a contact manager. So there's no good contact manager out there, right? So an entrepreneur says, hey, I'm going to invent a contact manager for the 21st century, and comes up with a whole bunch of different features and technologies for, you know, put it up in the cloud, and it, you know, sucks everything in from Facebook and LinkedIn and all these different places, and it organizes them and tags them and all that great stuff, right? Goes to the marketplace and discovers, well, guess what? There are some other people who are doing something like this. The difference between the inventor and the entrepreneur is the entrepreneur adjusts to what he or she learns as they go to market, and continuously tests and continuously improves on the solutions and the technologies used to go attack a market opportunity. The inventor wants to make sure that his invention is highlighted out in the marketplace. The entrepreneur is much more interested in solving a problem or exploiting an opportunity and doesn't really care how he does it as long as he wins. Obviously, from an investor point of view, we are not interested in an inventor. We're interested in an entrepreneur who wants to figure out how to win rather than gratifying his ego seeing his invention come to market, right? So that's another fairly big problem we see, and particularly here in Silicon Valley, where you have a lot of engineering-driven innovation, where you got a lot of guys who are hoping they'll win, you know, the Nobel laureate or whatever it is around their brilliant innovation. So, And then, you know, for a list of other things not to do as an entrepreneur, certainly I hope you all have a copy of my partner Guy Kawasaki's book called The Art of the Start. Do you have a copy of The Art of the Start?
Not many.
Please.
But don't tell them. Don't tell him that.
Oh my God. Are you telling me The Art of the Start has not been translated into Portuguese?
I think it
So
was.
Bob,
No, it was.
do people know that? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. It was translated, but not many people bought it.
Oh my God, you're
But
kidding.
don't tell him that, you know.
Of course I'll tell him that. You know, there's nothing that motivates Guy more than being pissed off, right?
So if he comes to talk to us in Brazil, we're going to buy all his books.
Oh, okay, good. That's good to hear.
All right.
So
we're kind of running out of time.
Okay.
Would you
Yeah.
like to summarize and give us final thoughts?
Yeah. So final thoughts. Boy, let's see. There's so many here. Yeah, I think you know what you know. So here's the you know, on the thread of what I was talking about before in terms of keeping your eye on the prize. It's really important. It's really important. You know, not to get hung up. You know, not to get hung up on your original business model. And one of the challenges we see is entrepreneurs, you know, they make this leap into okay, I'm going to start up a company, and they go out and they are passionate about it, and they tell all of their friends, and they tell anybody they can possibly meet that, you know, that this is what they're going to do, and they're going to start up this company, and it's going to be this great company, and then they discover that there's something wrong with their vision, right? And it is really, really important to be humble. You know, in terms of back of what we look for in entrepreneurial teams, what we're looking for is the right balance between sort of insane aggressiveness and true humility. And so what I hope to see in all of you, right, is an almost pathological aggressiveness about driving your company to success. But at the same time, what's critically important is that you're always listening. You're always listening to the people around you, and you're always co-opting new innovations wherever you can possibly grab them. And so the lesson I'm going to leave you with is the lesson that, you know, that is best typified by Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs is probably the best sort of archetype of driving a great company. And again, you know, back to my earlier point, he needed a team of people to do it. But having said that, what people consider to be Steve Jobs' brilliance is frequently misunderstood. Because if you look at what Steve Jobs has done, Steve Jobs has never invented anything. You go back and, you know, back to the Apple II. You know, none of the things that Apple has shipped has Apple invented in any sort of fundamental way. What Apple is brilliant at is stealing other people's innovations and incorporating them into their own products. And so this goes all the way back, you know, to the original history of Apple, right? Apple did not invent the graphical user interface. Apple did not invent the mouse. Apple did not invent the MP3 player. Apple did not invent the smartphone. They didn't invent the touch screen. They didn't invent the tablet. You know, Apple did not invent any of these things. But what they were great at, what Apple is brilliant at, is scanning the universe for the best innovations wherever they are and co-opting them in new ways into new products and new services that are brilliant. So remember, it's not about how brilliant you are at coming up with great ideas. It's how great your network is that enables you to tap all of the best ideas wherever they are in the world. That's what enables you to build a great company. So it's really about networking globally, not sitting in your dorm and inventing the next big thing. So again, I could keep going on, but I know you guys got to go off and drink whatever you guys drink. So
just beer.
I am delighted for the opportunity to chat with you this evening.
Thank you so much,
I don't know if there are any questions or comments before we sign off.
One question here. Come here on the microphone.
Yeah.
One quick question and quick answer, because we're running out of time.
Okay.
We still have more people to talk. We have a bunch of investors with us that we're going to get together. One question here.
So I'm looking at somebody's belly button. Okay, there we are. Hi.
Hi, Bill. My name is
Hi, good to see you.
And I'm actually an angel investor. I've previously been an entrepreneur. I'm investing in new business, and what I'd like to ask you is, on average, how long it takes to you see that a new company is not going to succeed? It's 6 months, a year, less, more. What is your feeling about that? And what's the major point you see? Okay, now I see that this is not going to happen.
I'll tell you. So I know a company. I know that a company is not going to happen as soon as the team gives up. And that's it. I mean, I tell you, I don't know if you know the story of Pandora, but we funded Pandora in the year 2000. And Pandora died 2 or 3 times along the way. And, a lot of people would have written them off, but the founders, they just kept going and going and going. And so none of us gave up on the team until the team gave up on themselves. And the fact of the matter is, they finally found a way, and God bless them. God bless them. I mean, they lived on rice cakes and, whatever, for 9 of the 11 years. And, they were, and then finally about 2 years ago, they managed to get the thing really taking off, and now they're worth $2 billion. So, that's probably not the answer you were looking for, but that's the reality.
Yes,
we give up when the team gives up.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much,
Sure.
Bill. We're going to give you a Brazilian applause.
Hey,
Can
guys.
you hear that?
Great chatting with you guys, and I guess for now I will say ciao.
Ciao, ciao. Thank you. Obrigado. Ciao.
Okay. All right.
Right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Signing.